Okay, we can get started. Quiet evening this evening. Anybody here not done meditation before? Okay, like this. Okay, so we're going to sit together for 30 minutes or so. I'll give some basic meditation instructions. Those of you who have done meditation or you have your own method, do feel free to follow your own method if you prefer. So settle yourself into comfortable posture. It is useful to be able to sit cross-legged, even if it takes some time, some years to get accustomed to the posture. After some time, just getting into the posture of meditation signals to your mind, this is the time for meditation. When you're ready, you put your attention onto your breathing. I would recommend feeling the breath as it runs through the center of the body, just in front of the spine. Do try to keep your attention on the inside of the body. You may follow the breath up and down as it goes in and out, or you may settle the attention down inside the body or inside the abdomen, feeling the breath going by, or if you prefer, feeling the rising and falling of the abdomen. The abdomen should expand with the in-breath and contract with the out-breath. If you are nervous or stressed, the abdomen will usually contract with the in-breath and expand with the out-breath. But yogic breathing, relaxed breathing, the abdomen expands with the in-breath. Or feel the breath as it runs through the center of the body. If you follow the physical feeling of the breath, it runs straight down all the way to the seat, even though you know logically the breath separates into the lungs at the back of the chest. But the physical sensation of the breath, if you follow it, runs down the center of the body. This is the prana, the life breath. You put your attention there and try to be with every breath. After a few moments or a few minutes, your mind will wish to wander away, thinking about this or that. Or your mind will wander off onto something happening around you, a sound, a feeling, a smell. Whenever the attention is lost, you wake up, re-establish mindfulness, bring the attention back to the breath. Whatever it was that distracted your attention, thought, memory, feeling, planning, wanting, aversion, Whatever it was, you let it go. Return to the breath. The ability to let go of things that attract your attention is your ability to let go, your ability to meditate. The more you are caught, driven, captured by thoughts, feelings, sounds, tastes, touches, the more your attention is yanked, driven, pulled around here and there. That is stress, that is suffering, that is the mind in a wavering, unhappy, unstable state. So the meditation is not just to attain to a new state of mind, but to train yourself time after time, being able to let go of whatever it is that arises into your attention. You get comfortable with the breath, you get comfortable with the feeling of yourself. This will give you a great refuge when you make mistakes, when you act in the wrong way, when people or situations are oppressing you. If you've trained yourself, you always have the breath to come back to. A place of refuge, a place where you are comfortable. No need to control the breathing in long or short. Just allow the breath to be natural. For those who are more accustomed to meditation, note when the mind is clearly knowing, mindful, recollection, and when the mind is distracted, lost or caught in a thought or feeling. Real mindfulness is not mindfulness of thinking or feeling or doing or acting. It is sati sampajanya, sati, to recollect, sampajanya, awareness, the recollection of your own awareness. You hang on to that. No need for meditation objects, no need for concentrating on the breath or feelings or mantras. If you can hold yourself in this limbo, this non-attachment, make the mind bright and clear. Don't allow it to waver or wander, even for a moment. Energization will occur through the body, a piti, a rapture. It's a physical, pleasant, euphoric feeling runs through the body. The body will appear pleasant to be in. At this point, let go of your meditation object or whatever you are doing and move into this energization or intensification of consciousness. As you settle into it, it becomes very bright, becomes very happy, becomes very stable. So we'll sit together for another 15 minutes or so. Make your mind as bright and as still as you can. Call into the mind the idea and the feeling of loving kindness, which is the well-wishing for all world beings. May all beings everywhere, in every state, be peaceful, be happy, be free from suffering. Use any method you prefer, visualization, the words. Any method you can think of to arouse this feeling is okay. You may imagine people or pets, living or passed away, to whom you feel love, loving kindness, unconditional well-wishing. Use that to arouse the state. Sobhana citta, beautiful state of mind. Radiate from the center of your being. A beautiful, loving kindness. Spreading out to the people in this room around us, sharing together. Taking that metta, loving kindness of the room here, of everybody here, spread it outwards further to the people of Bangkok, to the people of Thailand, spreading around the world, the entire globe, to the people who are suffering, to the people who are working, sleeping, the people who are happy, enveloping them all, to those beings you can't see, spiritual beings or tiny insects. To all beings, everywhere, in every state, may they be happy, may they be peaceful, may they be free from suffering. Sabbe buddha bala patta pache kanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabhaso sabba buddha nubhavena sattha soti bhakvantu te sabbe buddha bala patta pache kanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabba dhamma nubhavena sattha soti bhakvantu te Sabbe buddha bala patta pache kanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhakvantu te. So relax your posture. Okay, this evening, my final appearance here in Bangkok until January. So, after 28 years in Thailand, I will be, with the stick and the knotted handkerchief on the back of it, taking myself off to North America and to Sydney first and then North America. I don't know what will happen, but the plan is not to see you until next year. So this evening, I wanted to go through a few things. I'm just a little cautious. I don't want to bamboozle people who are new to meditation, but also I want to talk about some of the things that I've learned through 28 years as a monk. I hesitate to call advanced because I always think you are advanced as a meditator when you are making effort. You are not advanced in getting a certificate. These days that's how you do it, right? You get certificate and then you can show that I've been trained by this person, I have a certificate from that person, and then you can charge a lot of money. I don't have any certificates, so that's why I can't charge you money. Google certification for mindfulness master. One of our old yogis, she used to come in Ekamai when we had our center there. She got qualified as a certified Google mindfulness master. Yeah. She gets $25 an hour. So, good for her. When I first came across Buddhism, I was quite thrilled that I hadn't been told or taught that there was something called enlightenment or a spiritual path or a mystic path or a mystic attainment of any kind. I didn't know about that. I did read a book when I was very young called The 7 Footprints of Satan. And I reread it a few years ago. I got a very different impression. And in this book, it talked about the footprints of the Buddha after he was born. Apparently, his mother hung from a tree and gave birth standing up. It's a vivid image, right? And then he landed on his feet and he took 7 footsteps and surveyed the kingdom and said, "This is my final rebirth." So you can go to the place where this supposedly happened in India. Lumpini, right? And so I read this book, 7 Footprints of Satan, and it was based on these footprints of the Buddha, but going in the opposite direction of an evil character. And I remember asking my parents, like, what is the Buddha and what is enlightenment? And they had no idea. They gave me some response that didn't latch in my mind. But I was curious at that time, wanted to know. Many years later, some of you will know this story. I was driving with my father, delivering some sweets for packing, and there was a man meditating in his front garden as we drove past. And I said to my father, "What's he doing?" And my father said, "He's wasting his time." stuck in my mind, but I still wanted to know what he was doing, what it was about. But in British culture, certainly at that time, there was no awareness of a spiritual path. Spiritual path was you believe in this book and this man and one version of it. You know, there are 10 different kinds of Christianity across Britain, all claiming to be the right one. None of them made much sense. But it was a matter of belief that this is the truth and your job is to believe it. And if you believe it, you go to heaven. And if you don't, you're stuffed. You ever see that Rowan Atkinson sketch, Welcome to Hell? He has people lining up at hell. And anyway, look it up on YouTube. So this didn't really make much sense to me. So I was actually 21 years old when I first came across Buddhism or a teaching about enlightenment. And this said that spirituality is not something that you believe. It's not a book that you hold up to be better than other books. It is something that you actually practice and you change. Through a process of meditation, of internal contemplation, you can find something completely different, other and new, that will fundamentally reorient or change the way that you interpret and react with the world. This sounded very good to me. I was a kind of depressed, angry, unhappy teen and early 20s, so something that would hold out a promise of improvement was quite attractive. This is a fundamental part of Buddhist practice. We start from the premise that you don't know. The key word in Buddhism we translate as ignorance, but the original term is avijja. Now vijja, if you know Thailand, in Thai language vijja means the method. Or if you study in university, vijja ek is your, what do you call it, your major topic. So vijja is a method, it's something you know how to do. Avijja in the Pali means you don't know how to do it, you don't know the method, you don't know the right way to apply your attention, and then you get caught in a process called dependent arising or dependent origination. You get caught, the mind moves, it wants, it directs itself outwards through action of body, speech or mind. When it starts to act on the world, which includes your own self, it gets fired up into sensory consciousness. Because you get into sensory consciousness, you have what's called contact, or contacting. You get the feeling of me contacting the world. Because of this, you get feeling, liking and disliking. Because of liking and disliking, you get caught up in wanting. Because of wanting, you get caught up in attachment. Because of attachment, you get caught up in bhava, becoming or being. Key term in Buddhism, bhava. So this is called dependent origination. And it simply means that you put your attention onto something and it catches your attention. And that fires up like a fountain of reaction, and you get absorbed in that thing. It's easy to observe, in fact. You are sitting in your chair and you're quite comfortable, and then you think, what shall I eat for dinner? And suddenly your attention now moves out to food, thinking, shall I make this or that? What do I want to eat? 30 seconds ago you weren't thinking about food and you weren't hungry, but now the most important thing in the world is to get a rapid delivery of pizza. fires up, catches your attention, absorbs you. You get caught in liking and disliking, wanting, attachment. Bhava means conscious engagement with that thing. And it can be all kinds of things. When I was walking here this evening from the Mochit station, I have to walk down because the train is too packed for me to get on. Something caught in my mind that I'd read a few days ago about people applying for planning permission to do buildings in Britain. And if you do any adjustment to a building in Britain, you have to call in the Batman. And the Batman will inspect your property for bats. And if they find even one single bat dropping on any of your roof tiles, they will shut down your building. They will force you to have bat inspections, which can only be done in a couple of months of the year. They'll force you to install bat belfries. There's some law that says any adjustment to a building, you have to increase the biodiversity of the area. But what it does is it gives these environmental fascist kind of little dictators the power over you to start making you do things. So they make you do things for bats and newts and hedgehogs and all the rest of it. Started to annoy me. For some reason, as I was walking down, it lodges in your brain and then your mind latches onto it and you move towards it. If you know Buddhism, this is sankhara in this process. The term sankhara means action of body, speech or mind. Now, there are many debates on the term sankhara. It can mean different things in different contexts. We won't go into that today. But in this teaching, it means you have an action of mind. You act on something. Caught in sensory contact, a thought, a feeling lodges in the brain. You like, you dislike, you want, you don't want. You get caught in attachment. And then you can get propelled in this state of mind for 10 minutes, 1 hour, sometimes days or weeks. Something just really lodges in your attention. The more things lodge in your attention, the more they catch you, they compel you into thinking, into acting, into wanting and not wanting and liking. And this is stressful, this is unhappiness. In Buddhism, it's called dukkha. Dukkha means to shake, shakes the mind. The analogy is like a wheel that isn't centered properly. If the wheel is not balanced, it will start to shake. If you have a car and you change a tire, they charge you for balancing. And you think this is like $10 balancing, you think it's just a fake surcharge that they put on you. But what they do is they put a new tire on your wheel and they spin it very fast. And the tire is always slightly out of balance. There's thicker rubber on one side than another. And it will start to shake and shudder your car. So they attach these tiny little weights around the rim of your car to make sure that when it spins fast, it's spinning evenly. So the term suffering in Buddhism, dukkha, actually means shaking. The terms in the suttas, the original teachings, of getting advanced in practice, they talk about unshaking or unshakability, non-shaking. The non-shaking of the mind is when the mind settles in a pristine emptiness. There the mind is not shaking. It's not caught by anything. It takes a practice. So I heard about this, all of this stuff, and okay, Buddhism gives you a spiritual practice, something to actually do. We start from avijja, that I don't know. I really liked this concept, as opposed to the Christianity that I had learned. Later on I learned there were other forms of Christianity, namely the mystic side of Christianity, the meditators. At that time I didn't know about that. That they would always start from, this is the truth, you have to believe it. Buddhism starts from, you don't know the truth, you don't know the vicca, the right way to apply attention. And because of that, you'll get caught in this shaking of the mind, dukkha, suffering. When we say suffering, it doesn't mean, has three levels. The pain, sorrow, lamentation, grief and despair, which means the heavy suffering, the suffering that comes from change, from things just constantly being unstable, never being able to attain to stability in the mind. There's always, this change is always creating a movement, and it means you have to apply effort to stay alive and work and live. And then sankhara dukkata, just the movement of mind itself causes a subtle kind of suffering. These are three kinds of suffering in Buddhism, for those who know Buddhism. All schools of Buddhism agree on this, by the way. Dukkha dukkata, the suffering of pain. Viparinama dukkata, the suffering of change. And sankhara dukkata, the suffering of simply having mind states or acting in the world. So we start from this premise that because we don't know the right way, we're going to have to train and change. If you train the mind, it will reorient, it will learn new things, will have insight. And this is how we grow. This really attracted me because I knew that, I know that I suffer, I know that I'm unhappy, I know that I would really like something to change, and not just an idea that I can believe in. So I started practicing very hard, going to monasteries and retreat centers. You learn a lot. The introspection that comes from insight meditation. That means, with insight meditation, as it's taught around the world today, that means that when a state of mind arises, instead of being caught or lost in that state of mind, you have a distance from it, mindfulness or awareness or witnessing, so that you can see and examine that state of mind itself rather than being caught in it. So, for example, something annoys you. You get caught up in, I don't like that. I don't like these bat inspectors looking around my property. Right? It annoyed me. With mindfulness meditation or insight meditation, you separate yourself from it and you see it as a state of mind. You see you feel it. Like, oh, I can feel how that is creating disliking in my mind, is creating attachment. I can feel how much it's trying to draw me in. I can keep watching it until it disappears. And then I get left with a little silent space before I find something else to think about. I can see that as it disappears. That gives me insight into it, rather than being caught up in the story. So a mindfulness meditator does this through your life. It's a lifelong process, application. You continually are learning, examining, witnessing your own states of mind. The happy states and the unhappy states of mind. Anything that comes along, be willing to hold it in attention and just see it and feel it until it vanishes. One of the first and most important insights that comes from this is not believing your own thoughts. When the I thought comes up, like, I hate this, I love this, I want this. You learn to distrust that I thought, because as a mindfulness meditator, I like this. And you stop when you look at it. Well, do I really like this? What does liking this feel like? Like this person, what does that feel like? How long do I like this person? How much time do I spend liking this person? What is liking it, disliking? Then you start to disbelieve your own thoughts. You find that some things that you say to yourself, I love this. You're like, hang on, I don't like that very much. I did this with drinking beer because I was 20 years old in New Zealand as I was discovering all of this. And let's face it, there's not much else to do in New Zealand than drink beer, play pool, maybe go fishing, but I'm a vegetarian, so play rugby. Yeah, no thanks. Not the way the New Zealanders play it anyway. And so I would go to the pub with my friends, go to the bar and we play pool, and then I'd done the meditation retreat and I came back and immediately we went out. And then I looked around and there's all this noise of all these people talking loudly and the stink of alcohol and people acting like idiots. I suddenly realized, actually I don't like this. I thought I did. I do it compulsively, but it's horrible. Then I had this thing with the beer, I tasted it. Have you ever tasted beer? It's horrible. It is, really. I swear that I wasted so much money in my life thinking that I liked the taste of beer, when I tasted it, I didn't. Really annoyed of one of my friends, a New Zealander, I said, have you ever tasted beer? It's disgusting. And he said, no, it's beautiful, mate. And then anyway, 20 minutes later, he comes back from the bar with 5 bourbon and cokes. I said, you never drink bourbon and coke. And he shouted at me because I'd ruined his beer for him. So he switched. So insight meditation, this process of examining, suddenly you find things that you thought you liked, you actually don't like. Some things that you thought you disliked, you actually like. You have the ability to hold things in the mind and let them go from the mind without them overpowering you or compelling you. When you're not compelled, you get a sense of liberation and freedom, especially from this I thought. I can't stand this, I love this, I've got to do that, I'm going to go here. And you suddenly start listening to these thoughts. You're like, I can hear you speaking in my mind. You get a sense of, this isn't me. A thought comes up. And then you get the sense of, I can hear that thought coming up. It's not me, I didn't do it. I don't have to believe it. Not believing your own thoughts is a huge insight. Gives you so much empowerment. When I first really got this insight, I was living in a monastery in England, I was just so happy, because I have horrible thoughts, truly awful thoughts, compulsive and dumb, and they get me into trouble. This one time I was on meditation retreat, doing a Goenka retreat in England, as a layman at this time. And about the 3rd day of the retreat, I suddenly got this thought about how I can build a 2-seater hovercraft using farm irrigation pipe, as you do. And this thought got into my mind, and man, I spent the rest of the 10 days just building this hovercraft in my mind. It cost me a fortune, this stupid thought. I put maybe £3,000-4,000 into buying all the materials for this. I had to buy a big duct for the fan that goes on the back. And stupidly, I went to pick it up in my Mini, and I hadn't thought about how I'm going to get a 1 meter diameter duct into a Mini. It did go. I had to take the door off and the front seat and drive back 2 hours along the motorway with no door. Didn't get pulled over or arrested, fortunately. And I bought a 200cc Yamaha variable valve timing motorcycle engine to power it, stripped the gearbox out. Anyway, eventually all this stuff was just left at the side of our garage, and my father had to sell it after I moved out of home. So it never... My friends always said it's not a hovercraft, it's a craft, because I never got it hovering. The stupid thought lodges in your mind and costs fortune. And I didn't even like it, like the work. I liked the idea of zooming around in my little hovercraft. I just didn't want to build it. So, not believing your thoughts is a really powerful insight. Your thoughts cause your suffering. If you know Dhammapada, key text in Buddhism, first verse, all states of mind are led by mind, was the first verse in the Dhammapada. Yeah, your mind will get you into so much trouble. All your suffering comes from your mind. If you know vichara, you know the sensible, wise way to apply your attention, you're going to cause yourself less suffering than you used to. Don't believe your thoughts. Just because something occurs to your mind does not mean it's true or it's real. So mindfulness meditation, as it's taught in the modern world, does this. They teach you to be mindful of everything. And mindful means you separate from it rather than being caught or lost in that state of mind. You train yourself to be able to observe all states of mind and all thoughts as a witness. Tremendously empowering. I was so happy when I learned this. My own nature is one of depression. So you know how you have like sober alcoholics, people who are alcoholics but remain 100% teetotal and sober. I have some friends who are like that. Alcohol never attracted me for some reason. And I've never done a drug. I'm quite proud of that. I've never taken a drug. Some people say I should, but... So like you have sober alcoholics, I'm a happy depressive. That depression is, for those people who have it, and some people do, so I will occasionally talk about it, it's a black hole that sucks you in of self-destruction, and it colours everything. Even the nicest of most beautiful things, it turns into something hateful and unpleasant. And it draws you in, and it's so hard to get out of. And it's not caused by a thing. It's not because your boyfriend or girlfriend dumped you, or not because you lost your job. It's something else. It's a tendency of mind, obsessive tendency of mind that will suck you in, and it's so hard to get out of. I think like alcoholism, some people do with drugs and alcohol. You have to be really careful. If this is your state of mind, some people this will make sense. Actually, in Buddhism, there were 3 personality types. If you dwell on the past, you will dwell on the things that you dislike, and you will tend towards depression. If you dwell on the future, you will tend to things that you like or you want. So your mind will tend towards greed. If you dwell only in the present moment, but unskillfully, you will tend towards distraction, like TV or wasting time. So these were the 3 things, whether you focus attention on things that you like, you dislike, or are neutral. It's called, if you know Buddhism, it's called Lopa Jarita, focusing on what you like, Lopa or Kwam Lop in Thai. Dosa Jarita, focusing on what you dislike, which will tend to be in the past. And Moha Jarita. Jarita is jitjai, your heart. Moha is delusion. So there are 3 because things you like, dislike, or neutral. Depends on your character type. Just by the by, the teaching, the original teaching of the Buddha said, if you are of dosa charita, you focus on what you dislike and you tend towards depression and hatred and anger, negative states of mind. If you practice well, you become banya charita, wise, because you can see the truth of things. If you are lopa charita, one who focuses on the future and things that you want to get, you're greed-driven, if you practice well, you will become one of satta, or faith. This is all schools of Buddhism, by the way, including Tibetan. if you are mohajarita, one who focuses on the nonsense or unwholesome, if you practice well, you become one of focus, be able to focus the mind. So, one of early personality theory. So, for me, I'm a dosa charita. I focus on what I dislike. It's also what powers problem solving. It's not always a bad thing. Problem solvers are people who like, that's not right, I'm going to fix that problem. Can get very bad. See, I sit in Bangkok traffic a lot, and then so I had this long fantasy for several years about how I was going to invent a new Bangkok mass transit system called the Naga, the Payanags train. And it goes on the road to let people on and off, and then dips underneath the road and then comes up, so like a Naga serpent. And I planned out routes and where it would go. And the good thing about this is, whereas an underground, you've got to dig this long, deep tunnel and prevent flooding and thing. But with the Naga train, where you have a bridge, you can just bring it up onto the road, and it goes along the road over the bridge, and then it dips down. I have it all worked out. I spend a lot of time in taxis in Bangkok, so you have time to work these things out. That's dosa charita, focusing on what I dislike. I want to problem solve. So the insight that what I think, I don't have to believe it. And actually, it's a really beautiful state and feeling when you let it go and you just learn to stop and all the really spiritual states of mind come when the mind stops. This is why churches were built the way they were. It's very hard to build a building, a high roof building or a large building. The further apart you put the posts, the thicker your beam has to be over the top. I've done a bit of building, and you have to work these things out. So building was always small rooms, because then you can put a tree trunk across the top, make a roof. But to build a large room was difficult. One of the things that happens, building a large room like a cathedral, the walls will bow out. They spread out. So churches have these, there's a word for it, I can't remember, but they have these arches that come off the side of the walls. Flying buttresses, that's it. And they're there to hold the wall in place. They look quite beautiful, but if you come to Wat Pak Nam, where I live, I always show people, we come into the boat. Boat is the central chapel. And then I send them at the wall, and I say, look down this wall and see if you can see anything strange. And most people don't, but the engineers are like, whoa, the whole wall is bowed in. And when you look, when I point it out, you see it clearly. The whole room is like, bleh. It makes you feel like you don't want to be in there. So cathedrals were built, it's difficult to build large buildings. And then stained glass, and they'd orientate to the sun, and the sun would blast through these images. And churches were built to awe, A-W-E, awe, awesome. When you're in awe, your mind stops. When your mind stops, you get closer to God, for want of a better word. That's why in the mystic Christianity, they say God comes in the whisper of the reeds, or God comes in the cleft of a mountain. Somewhere out of the way, in the quiet spaces, that's where the awareness starts to arise. So, it's the same in Buddhism, it's just the psychodynamics of the human mind. If you know how to stop, then the beautiful states start to arise. States that are not based on wanting this or disliking that, or my personality, my hopes, my dreams, my aspirations, my nature, my politics, my environment, my bats. It's not based on any of those things. This is a beautiful thing that starts to arise in the space. But here's the problem that I had with these insight meditation circuits. They teach you all this mindfulness, but there is a disparity between this and what the original texts were teaching. The original mystic texts, mostly of Buddhism is what I know more, but Ramana Maharshi was one, Nisargadatta another one, Saint Teresa of Avila, the Cloud of Unknowing. There are lots of these mystic texts around. A lot of the Old Testament. And they're all pointing to something completely different. They're not these psychological insights that modern day meditation circuits are teaching. And I had a big problem my whole monastic life that meditation teachers were teaching this psychological stuff. I have a degree in psychology, so I kind of know where a lot of this stuff comes from. One teacher I had is very well known, but he would always say, when something arises, you don't suppress it. Suppress? I've read the original Buddhist text from front to back. I've never seen any word, anything like suppress. Suppress is a Freudian defense mechanism. It comes from psychology. It's not mysticism. It's not this thing that the original teachers are pointing to. It's a pseudo-psychology. And so much of what I see getting taught around is this useful, beneficial, handy, but pseudo-psychology. Self-help, be a nice person, take precepts, try to let go of anger. It's all good stuff. But in Buddhism, that was just preliminary stuff. Just getting yourself into the right space. Then you start the practice. So for some 25 years, I had this difficulty. And I was also repeating a lot of these teachings that are around. They're good teachings, but then I've heard them and I repeat them, but they're not what the original... The original was talking about something completely other, something completely different. An enlightenment that takes you beyond liking and disliking, life and death even. That's supposed to give you an insight that removes or changes every other thing that's possible. Of a happiness that doesn't depend on anything, that even you can go through death. Called many terms. Unconditioned is one of the terms. Awakening is another term. Nibbana is another term. The goal. One of the terms I liked was the shore that has no shore beyond it, was another term. In Buddhism, there are something like 45 of these different terms used to try and describe this thing, whatever it is. Look at Ramana Maharshi, Indian sage. One of his sayings, look at the mind and find the I thought. I this and I that. Follow the I thought back to the source. When you get to the source, you see there is no I. That's when you know the self. I had this in my mind for years, and I made it into a poetic thing. And you know, like when you hear lyrics to a song and you mishear them, but you make the song make sense somehow. And then this happened to me with a number of songs, and then when the internet first came along, one of the first things I did was, what were the lyrics of this song? You find out that thing. There was a Simon and Garfunkel song, Tom, get your plane right on time. I know you're part of the wolf line. It's like, what's a wolf line? I made this thing, this wolf line in my mind. Like, well, it must be a secret organization and you're part of it, and stuck in my mind for years. And it was about 2001 when I first got internet, dial-up, you know, and then you sit, pray, please connect, please connect. And I looked it up. Actually, it was Tom, get your plane right on time. I know your part will go fine. There's no wolves in there at all. Man, they're so upset. Well, your part will go fine. That means like your part in life. Then I found out that was wrong. It was actually Lee. Some of you might remember Lee. He said to me, no. Simon and Garfunkel were originally called Tom and Jerry or something, their stage name. And Tom was Art Garfunkel, and he'd got a part in a movie called Catch-22. And Paul Simon was saying, your part will go fine in the movie. That's all it meant. If you put these things in your mind, you make them make a kind of sense. And this is where religion always goes off track. And all religions, they go off track because people grab the teachings and hold it in the wrong way. The Buddha warned about this. He said the Dhamma is like a snake. If you grab it at the wrong end, you're going to wind up suffering. And he said in the years and centuries after I pass away, the Dhamma will become corrupted, like a drum. If you want to know why a drum, I can tell you. So what people were teaching was this mindfulness, and what the texts were teaching was this actual, complete other attainment, a mystic attainment that is hard to describe. So I had this for a long time, for 25 years, and what the insight meditation schools teach is that you shouldn't concentrate the mind. If you concentrate and you attain to these blissful states of mind called jhanas, that's a distraction. The Buddha did jhanas in his younger days. It didn't get him enlightened. You have to do this insight. It's what's taught in these schools. But when I read the text originally, that's not what was taught. Time and time again, the Buddha said, you should attain to these jhana or absorption states of mind. I understood it to mean when you focus on a meditation object like the breath, or a mantra, or a color, if you focus hard enough, your mind will freeze and stop still on that thing, and then you experience a bliss. I could never, it's always so tiresome for me, trying to force my mind onto an object. Like, I didn't want to do it. I do enough forcing of the mind in daily life. When I meditate, I want to just stop. I don't want to do this forcing of my mind onto an object. So I believed these Vipassana schools that said, don't practice jhana, concentration, meditation. They're categorically wrong. It's taken me 25 years before I gained the confidence and the knowledge to say that all of these schools that are teaching this are incorrect. And you can verify it by looking at original Buddhist texts. They all say, text after text, sutta after sutta, saying after saying, you should practice these jhana, absorption, concentration states. I had one teacher, a friend of mine. There was a girl, I knew she was attaining to these states, but she wanted to join our retreat late because she was working on a Friday. And I said to the teacher who I'd booked to lead the retreat, I said, can she come late? He said, no. I said, look, she's attaining to these states of concentration and she needs some help and guidance. He said, in that case, definitely no. And this is one of the problems. A lot of these teachers don't practice deep meditation. So they don't know what it is. They don't know how to advise you. And when your mind attains in the right way, they don't know how to tell you that that's the right state. They want to keep knocking you back into having insight when I have a thought, or in my anger or my desire. Hold it in attention, get insight into it, over and over and over. Yeah, but why? There has to be a result that isn't just that. That's the process, not the end result. So it took a long time before I could put the pieces together. Here's what happens. All the original texts will tell you to hold yourself in this limbo state of not allowing the mind to get caught in anything. It's not focusing on an object, not focusing on your breath, or a mantra, or a color, or a tantra. That's creating a certain state of mind. Holding yourself back from all of that activity of mind. First of all, you feel dull and sleepy, but if you settle into that space, it's called animita. It's also called shunyata, emptiness, or another word that I can never remember, but it means desirelessness. But animita, nimitta is an image that comes up in the mind of anything, bats, lovers, food, whatever it is that you call up into the mind. Not calling any perception up into the mind at all. Stopping this process of perceiving things in the mind. What happens is then, the mind starts to coalesce, it comes together. The actual word in the sutta, ekabhava, becoming one, ekagata, going as one, which we translate as centered. But a vivid, sharp centeredness, awakening that happens. It's not, hey dude, I'm feeling pretty centered today. I'm feeling pretty chill today. You can do that. You can go on retreat in a nice retreat center, have some nice food. In January, we're going on the lake down in Khao Sok, something like that, in southern Thailand, organized by Marissa. I will announce it, but man, does it cost a lot of money. Sorry, she's arranging it, not me. You go to a lovely place, then you feel like, hey, really, like I'm not attaching to anything, I'm free, man. No, because the mind is still moving from one thing to another thing to another thing, still constantly in the process. It's just having a pretty chill day. I'm talking about when the mind does not go to perceiving anything. In the Thai masters, they talk about the mind going out. They say when you stop the mind going out, the mind goes out to sounds, feelings, tastes, touches. It also goes out to thoughts. They say you don't let the mind go out to anything. This is Lumpur Dun, if you know him. His Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth, suffering, is when the mind goes out. The arising of suffering is the mind leaving its home. Cessation of suffering is when the mind does not go out. The path leading to the cessation of suffering is stopping the mind going out. This was Lumpur Dun. He was a famous Thai teacher. He had this summary of Buddhism. It's very straightforward. He's telling you the method right there, but people overlook. When the mind does not go out to anything, it starts to coalesce and come together. There's a feeling of relentless presence that doesn't shake. Thoughts may still come and go. You don't pay any attention to them. You're locked onto this centeredness. It will come through the body. This euphoria that they say, blissful states, it's not blissful at all. It's a physical sensation that comes through the body, energization and intensification of consciousness. And you feel it directly. As the consciousness intensifies, you know it's intensifying. As you start to think about other things or start perceiving things, you feel it dissipating. It gets very clear. It's called the insight into what is the path and what is not the path. It's one of the 16 jnana, if you know your Abhidhamma. As it coalesces, it becomes bright, not lights. Lights is something you see either internally or externally, but becomes a bright, an awareness unfolds like this. Your eyes kind of raise upwards. You are not sleeping. You're not nodding off. You are not in some meditation state, some zombie state, trance state. The original translators translated these things as trance. It's not a trance. It's an intensification of consciousness. You are awake and aware and you really know it. A sukha arises, happiness. And the happiness arises that is not dependent on anything. It's dependent on you meditating. But it's not dependent on having Vegemite on your toast. It's not dependent on seeing somebody you like to see, hearing somebody you like to hear. It's not dependent on Donald Trump making America great again. It's not dependent on having great bat biodiversity in your environment. It's not dependent on fixing the Bangkok traffic problem. It's not dependent on looking beautiful. It comes up by itself when the mind stops doing anything. Its own nature, the mind's own nature, actually is happiness. It took a long time for me to have confidence to say that to anybody, because as I say, I'm of a depressive character myself. Give me a bit of space, I'll find something to complain about. I'm English, we like complaining, right? We grumble about things. Our Qigong teacher, Marissa, I was grumbling to her one day. And Americans don't get it. You see, Americans think that when British are grumbling, they think we're actually complaining about that thing. We're not. We just want to grumble about something. So I was grumbling to her about nonsense. And she came out with a devastating insult. Right, don't laugh. This is what she said to me while I was grumbling. She said, "Oh, it isn't easy being orange." Then she tried to dig herself out of the hole and saying, "No, it comes from Kermit the Frog. This isn't easy being green." That doesn't make it better. The nature of the mind, if it stops perceiving things, stops acting, is just pure happiness. Ekagata, goes as one, it's unified, centered. So these experiences can start to come up, and meditation teachers who don't talk about this, who don't practice this, can't advise you, and when you're attaining in the right way, they've nothing to say to you. So a friend of mine was making these attainments, and she went to the Vipassana teacher that she was with, and he said, "You could come back to the breath," and she says, "No, this feels like the right thing." And he said, "Well, I can give you a book." He had no interest in working with these states of mind. As soon as she told me, I'm like, "Oh, that's exactly right. That's the right attainment there." And when somebody says it to you and it points it out, and then you're like, oh, it becomes very, very clear. So I want to leave Bangkok today with the encouragement that keep in mind with your meditation practice. These insight meditation practices are good and they're useful. They served me for a long time. I'm extremely grateful to my teachers. But the original teachings were pointing to this super mundane, this completely other attainment that is completely different to every other thing. Because every other state of mind depends on focusing on something, reacting to something. The state of mind which has stopped this movement becomes self-knowing, self-aware, self-energizing. You feel it through your body will feel very pleasant to be in. If that happens, by the way, come straight to the pleasant body and carry on your meditation from there. You can drop your meditation object. Yeah. So that's the thought I wanted to leave you with. There's just time if anybody has a question or something that I've mentioned that you want to clarify. Yeah.
sheath.
Yeah.
That he talks about this being able to walk through walls and fly through mountains and touch the sun and touch the
Yeah.
moon and things that are quite mystic. And
Yeah.
he talks about psi abilities of reading people's minds and all of these things that I didn't know was taught.
These were taught, and they get wiped out of modern day meditation. Yes, let him finish.
Sorry, I don't have a question. In one moment, I will have a question. And so they've taken these monks and they've put them in MRI machines and they've done brain scans,
Right.
and they know that when they reach samadhi, that they're pushing their minds into the theta state. So this 4 to 8 hertz
Yeah.
of the mind.
Yeah.
And this also, there is technology now that can push the mind into that in meditative states. And there are teachings also outside of Buddhism about building these second bodies in these states, and that it's quite different than this, Vipassana teachings and the mindfulness that I was originally taught, and then have, because of some of the things you've talked about, have moved from. I'm really curious to know about what your thoughts are on these things. That one, that some of it seems that there's some attainment that's possible without the ascetic life. That maybe there's technologies, modern technologies that can push the mind into these things, and then also that meditation might be quite different than what is being taught.
Right. So the question is, in one of the key texts, The Fruits of the Ascetic Life, Digha Nikaya, Long Discourses, at the end of the sutta, it describes a whole bunch of psychic powers and psychic phenomena that will occur. Namely, that one draws out of the body a psychic body or a mind-made body, and this body is able to roam the universe and do different things and know minds of other people, see devas and heavens and hell realms. All of this has got wiped out of modern day Buddhism because they want pure psychodynamics. They want this pseudo-psychology. Yet that was what was in there originally. The second part of his comment was that there may be some devices that can propel you into these states of mind. I wouldn't trust that any more than I would trust a drug. Some people have spiritual experiences on drugs, but I wouldn't trust that either. I wouldn't do that. As for monitoring the brain states, you put you into a machine, and if you're meditating hard, they say, oh, your brain waves are different. Well, yeah, they are, because you're doing something different than thinking about mixed martial arts, UFC 300 in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So of course you have different brain states, but it doesn't mean anything. The fact that you have a different hertz of activity in the brain, what does that even mean? You know it internally. I admire science for trying to externally monitor these things, but you know it internally. It's something that you do and you know inside, internally for yourself. This is why I started off by saying that religion that says we have the truth and this you have to believe that book is all externalized. Internalized, actually you see and know directly for yourself. It's very different. So, we have to do the practice. I don't think there's any machines that will take you. I did try one of these things you put on your head, and then you can start to play with your mind states, and then it gives you a biofeedback. It kind of gave me a headache. That was about 10 years ago. They may have gotten better since then. Yeah, a lot of my teachers were doing these mind-made bodies. They would send the body out and do things. Personally, I haven't. But, yeah. Anyone else? One last moment? Okay, just very briefly. Yes, but there is an attainment. There is a thing. Methods apply to how you apply your mind and what you teach the mind and what you do with the mind. These are methods. And you can use the breath, you can use metta meditation, you can use contemplations, but all of these apply to putting your attention or applying your attention to a certain perception. If you apply your attention to the perception of metta, you become more joyous, more beautiful. You have more loving kindness for people. But it's still just putting your mind onto a perception. That's what methods are. And there are lots of methods, and they do apply to different people. And some people like some and not others. But what I'm talking about is not another perception. It's what happens when you stop all of that process itself. And this is the goal of the holy life in every mystic tradition. So, no, it's an actual real thing. I always say it's like Australia. It doesn't matter if you believe in Australia or not, or whether you like it or you don't like it, or redback spiders and all the rest of it. Australia is real. It's actually there. It is a thing you can go and stand on. The same way these states of mind, beyond states of mind, beyond perception, are real, and they are to be attained to. And that's what is the goal, without any doubt. Now, if you benefit from a breathing practice or a yoga practice or a mindfulness practice or a metta, but go ahead. I'm, 100%. That's why we take precepts. That's why we practice metta. But there is this other thing, and it's actually real, and it's there. Unmistakable when you touch it. It's what drives. People who do touch it, even for a moment, it will drive you spiritual practice for a lifetime. Some of you will have had that. That moment, you've just caught a glimpse, you just kind of almost hear God, and then you can spend the rest of your lifetime trying to get back to that, trying to understand it. So that's real. Last question, and then we're going to stop, but I will be here after we finish.
Just a very quick one. I wanted to pick up on something. You said when you find your body is really pleasant and to drop the breath or whatever object that you were focusing on.
Yeah.
For me, I kind of find when I try to shift the focus or drop the focus between objects rather than maybe happening on its own, it kind of breaks kind of like you feel like you go backwards. So I just wanted to understand how would you prescribe that you drop the object that you're focusing on?
To focusing on a meditation object can lull you into a trance-like state, can feel quite nice and pleasant, but it's dull. At some point you stop the meditating on an object, because that's still an empowered thing. You still have to put in effort to keep directing yourself. And you simply have applied and sustained attention, vitaka vichara, which means you knowing yourself but not allowing yourself to get sucked into anything. This is first jhana. When you get into that state and it's a little unstable, you're like, okay, keep applying. Then the piti will start to arise, comes through the body. When the piti starts, you get this pleasant sensation of the body. Now, if you have a bad knee and you go and think about your knee, it still hurts. If you put attention onto it, because you're calling that into perception. But if you don't call anything into perception, then you get this feeling of the body being there, and it's kind of pleasant, not ecstatic. You're not going to write to your parents and tell them, but it's nice to be in. When you get that, just be in that nice body. You don't need meditation objects. And it's self-empowering, because if you start to perceive things in the mind again, you can feel yourself losing it, and then you feel yourself coming back. So then you feel your way through it. But if nobody has mentioned these things to you, you won't know it. And so you feel this and doesn't seem like very much. Then you go back to the breath, or counting breaths, or whatever it is that you are doing. So you feel your way through it. Here's the main things. It will feel pleasant. There'll be an energization, a piti comes through the body. Sometimes the body will feel quite large, will feel bright. You will feel clearly what is stabilizing you and what is destabilizing you. You know clearly then the way to go, going into that stabilization, and it becomes brighter. In one of the Zen texts, the Platform Sutta, it says you polish the mind, polish the mirror mind. And it's literally like that, yeah. Okay, I will see you maybe in January.